Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different, a bit of an experiment. We're taking a place that everyone thinks they know, and we're going to try and completely break that perception.
We are heading north.
Way north. To the Pine Tree State.
Maine.
Maine.
Yeah.
Now just pause for a second. I want you, our listener, to just close your eyes for a moment.
Okay.
When I say Maine, what's the first image that pops into your head?
It's almost always a postcard, right? It's a lobster roll, just dripping in butter.
Yeah, that, or maybe a pristine white lighthouse sitting on some rocky cliff.
Absolutely. The quintessential New England coast.
Or maybe a guy in a brand new LL Bean sweater looking, thoughtfully out at the horizon. It's vacation land.
It's literally on the license plate. That's the brand.
That is the brand. Or, if you're more of a reader, maybe a film buff. It's Stephen King country.
Oh, yeah. That's the other side of the coin, is a killer clown in a storm drain.
Or a creepy mist rolling in over a lake hiding something terrible.
Exactly. So it's either this quaint, charming bed and breakfast.
Or it's a horror movie set.
Yeah.
But both of those, they feel like caricatures, don't they? They feel very surface level.
They're the stories we tell to sell T-shirts, or movie tickets.
Right. But what we have in this stag today is, well, honestly, it's a beautiful mess of sources.
It really is.
And it paints a picture of a state that is so much grittier and stranger and, frankly, a lot louder than the brochure version.
It's a fascinating mix. We are definitely not just looking at travel guides today.
No, we went broad on this one. We have transcripts from some Travel Channel investigations. We have this very contentious list of haunted locations that reads almost like a paranormal police blotter.
And we have historical records from the FBI, actual FBI files regarding Public Enemy #1.
Which is wild. And this might be my favorite addition to the stack.
I think I know which one you're going to say.
A trade publication for the Pile Driving Contractors Association.
There it is, Pile Driver Magazine.
Which, I have to admit, I stared at for a solid 5 minutes just wondering why it was even here. I mean, it's a magazine about hammering big poles into the ground.
It is, but once you actually get into it, it sort of ties everything together.
Yeah, it really does. It provides the literal foundation for all the other stories we're going to talk about.
It grounds the narrative, quite literally. It's a reminder that history isn't just, stories floating in the air. It's built on something physical.
So here is the mission for this deep dive. We're going to peel back that tourist veneer and look at 3 very specific hidden layers of Maine history.
Okay.
First, we have the supernatural landscape, which is apparently a subject of some pretty serious data controversy.
Hell yes. People have strong feelings.
Then we have the criminal layer. And we're talking 1930s gangsters having actual shootouts in the streets of Bangor.
Which is just not something you ever associate with Bangor. You think lumber, maybe, but not Tommy guns.
Not at all. And then finally, we have the engineering layer. The massive granite and steel structures that literally hold the state together against the elements.
And the goal here really is to show how these things aren't actually separate. They're all connected.
Exactly. You have a bridge construction project that is visually linked to a haunted fort.
Which is just down the river from where a U.S. vice president is buried, literally next to a violent bank robber.
It is all connected. So let's start with that layer that sits right on top, the stories people tell in the dark. Because apparently the Travel Channel made some enemies in Maine not too long ago.
They really did. This all stems from a ranking the Travel Channel put out.
Okay.
They released a list of the most haunted states.
Right.
And they crunched whatever data they use, and they ranked Maine 43rd.
43rd. That's barely a participation trophy.
It's tied with North Dakota and Hawaii.
And Nebraska.
And Nebraska.
That feels like a personal insult to the entire state of Maine. Just think about the geography for a second.
Right.
You have those jagged, dangerous coastlines where ships have been wrecking for centuries. You have these deep, unending woods where you can walk for days and not see a single soul.
And the winters. Long, dark, isolating winters.
Geographically, it should be haunted. It's spooky by default. The atmosphere is just built in.
It definitely has the atmosphere. But the source article we have, it's from WQCB in Brewer, Maine, was pretty indignant about this ranking.
I bet they were.
They basically said the Travel Channel just didn't do their homework.
So what was their argument? Because, we feel spookier than Nebraska is a hard thing to prove with data.
Well, they tried to bring some methodology to the fight. The argument is that the Travel Channel based its data almost solely on where their own TV shows had filmed.
Ah, okay. So it's a self-serving metric.
Exactly. Shows like Ghost Adventures, portals to hell. Since they hadn't filmed very much in Maine, the data was completely skewed.
So where do they film?
They focused almost entirely on one single location in Portland, the Wadsworth Longfellow House.
So they look at one museum in the biggest city, didn't see a ghost, and said, all right, pack it up, boys. Maine is boring.
That's essentially the accusation. They were looking for TV-ready haunts, and if they didn't find them easily, they just moved on.
But the rebuttal data is where it gets really interesting.
This is where it gets good. The local source pulled numbers from a site called ghostsofamerica.com. And, obviously we have to take self-reported ghost data with a grain of salt.
Sure, this isn't the Census Bureau we're talking about, but the sheer volume of it is what matters here.
Exactly. When you look at the raw number of reports coming from locals, it just completely flips the narrative on its head.
How so?
According to that data, Maine actually has the highest frequency of ghost sightings per capita in the entire country.
Per capita. Not just total number, but per person.
Per person. That is a lot of ghosts for the population.
What's the number?
The source cites 56 sightings for every 100,000 people. And they even mention the town of Sanford specifically, which has had 23 distinct sightings just since 2005.
That is a startlingly high number for one town. So the locals are basically saying, we see things all the time, you guys just aren't looking.
And to prove it.
And to prove it, we have this incredible source, this list of 36 spooky and haunted places in Maine. I read through this thing, and it is just a laundry list of high-octane nightmare fuel.
It is quite a collection. It really moves away from the generic, I heard a creaky floorboard kind of haunting.
Oh, yeah.
It gets into some very specific, very tragic local lore. What stood out to you first?
Okay, we have to unpack a few of the standouts, because some of these are just wild. We have to start with the cursed tomb of Colonel Buck in Bucksport.
A classic.
This feels like something straight out of the Salem witch trials, but it's happening way further north.
It is a classic piece of New England folklore. So Colonel Jonathan Buck, he was the founder of Bucksport, a Revolutionary War hero, pillar of the community, all that.
The town big shot.
The town big shot. But the legend is dark. It says he condemned a woman to be executed for witchcraft.
And this wasn't a quiet execution from what I read.
No. The story goes that before she died, and the legend varies, some say burned, some say hanged, she cursed him.
Okay.
She claimed that she would leave a mark on his tomb that could never, ever be removed to serve as a witness to his injustice.
So basically, I will dance on your grave.
Literally. And sure enough, if you go to the cemetery today, and our source has photos of this, there is a stain on his granite monument.
And it's not just a random splotch. I looked at the picture. It looks exactly like a woman's leg and foot. The shape is just undeniable.
It's uncanny, and the local lore claims it's been scrubbed, it's been replaced. They've even tried to grind the stone down.
But it always comes back.
The stain always returns. It acts as this permanent reminder of historical guilt. It's this idea that you can't just whitewash the past, the stain remains.
It's such a tangible haunting, It's not just a cold spot or a feeling. It's a physical mark on the stone. It reminds me of those nuclear shadows just burned into the place.
That's a great way to put it.
But then you have these roadside tragedies. The source talks about Route 2A, the Haynesville Road.
Ugh, the Tombstone Every Mile Road.
Yeah, that's the one. Apparently there's a whole country song about it by Dick Curlis. But the haunting they describe here is just heartbreaking.
It really is.
So drivers report seeing a woman on the side of the road. She's not scary, she's terrified, she's crying, she's begging for help.
And she says her husband is trapped in a car wreck.
Right. And this plays on such a deep human instinct. If you see someone in distress in the snow in the middle of the Maine woods, you stop.
Yeah.
You have to.
Of course.
But the story says that when you pull over to help her, she just vanishes.
It's a residual replay of a tragedy, an energy loop.
It's a loop of pure helplessness. You want to save her, you want to help, but you can't because she's already gone. And you see a really similar pattern on Brownville Road in Millinocket. The bride, right?
Yes. The apparition of a woman in a wedding gown.
Another tragic story.
The story is that she and her new husband crashed on the way to or from their wedding. He died instantly, and she froze to death waiting for someone to find her.
And so now she appears, just still waiting for help that never came.
That specific detail, freezing to death, that really grounds it in the main reality. It's such a harsh landscape.
The cold is a character in these stories.
Yes. It's not just a ghost. It's a ghost created by the environment itself.
The environment kills you, and then the memory gets stuck there. But it's not just the lonely roads, is it? The university seemed to be absolutely teeming with paranormal activity.
Well, they're usually old buildings with a lot of intense emotional energy, so it makes sense.
True, but the University of Maine at Farmington has a very specific auditory haunting.
The auditorium, right. It's said to be home to the ghost of Lillian Nordica.
The opera singer, I've heard of her.
The very same. She was a huge international star in the late 19th century, and she was born right there in Farmington.
And the lore says what? That she's heard singing in the empty hall.
That's the story, just the sound of her voice echoing in the dark.
See, that's almost elegant. I wouldn't mind that one so much. A free concert from a spectral diva. I could live with that.
It's not particularly threatening.
No, but then you contrast that with the Roby Andrews dorm at the University of Southern Maine in Gorham. That story sounded genuinely terrifying.
That one is much, much darker. The source mentions a girl who committed suicide in her room after a betrayal. That's the tragic origin.
But the manifestations are aggressive.
Very. Students who live in that room report sudden, dramatic temperature drops. They see objects move on their own. It's classic poltergeist activity.
There was one specific account in the source that really got to me. A student named Jason.
I remember this one.
He mentioned waking up in the middle of the night to feel arms hugging him tight, and he thought it was his girlfriend.
But she was asleep on the other side of the bed?
Nope, absolutely not. That is way too close for comfort.
That's a violation.
It is. It completely changes the dynamic from I saw something over there to something touched me. It's an invasion of your personal space.
It creates a real sense of vulnerability.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about unsettling, I think the smiling man at the Auburn Public Library might take the prize.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about the smiling man. Why is a smiling man so much worse than a screaming ghost? Because when I read that, I got a legitimate chill.
I think it's because the smile implies intent. It implies he knows something you don't. It's not just a residual energy, it's an intelligence.
So what's the story?
The staff report being followed through the stacks by a man who is just smiling.
That's it. He just smiles.
That's it. And when they turned to confront him or ask if he needs help, he's gone. It disrupts the sanctity of a library. A library is supposed to be a safe, quiet place.
It's psychological horror. It implies a predator, or at least a voyeur. That belongs in a David Lynch movie or something.
Totally.
But there is one more I want to highlight from the oddities category in that list. Beckett's Castle in Cape Elizabeth.
The blue orb?
Blue orb. It's supposed to be the spirit of the poet Sylvester Beckett, and it appears as this ball of blue light.
Okay, a blue orb, I can handle that.
But here's the thing. It physically interacts with the environment. It pulls bed sheets off of sleeping guests.
Which is just rude.
Very rude. And this is the really interesting part. It refuses to let the tower door stay closed.
Even when it's nailed shut, right?
Even when nailed shut. The source says the door is repeatedly found wide open. It implies a force that isn't just residual, like the woman on the road repeating her death. This thing has agency. It has a goal. It wants that door open.
It has a mission. So, okay, we've clearly established that Maine is, contrary to the Travel Channel's opinion, extremely active paranormally.
Understatement of the year.
You have cursed tombs, freezing brides, phantom opera singers, and smiling stalkers. But there's one place that seems to bridge the gap between all this spooky folklore and the hard, cold reality of history.
And that's Fort Knox.
That's Fort Knox.
And just to clarify again for the listener, because I know everyone is thinking it,
Yeah.
this is not the Fort Knox with all the gold bars.
Right. That's in Kentucky. Please do not go to Maine looking for the nation's gold reserve. You will be very disappointed.
This is Fort Knox in Prospect, Maine. It's named after the same guy, Henry Knox, the first Secretary of War, but it had a completely different purpose.
And it is arguably the crown jewel of Maine hauntings.
It's the location that brought the Destination Fear crew to Maine for their show. The source mentions the host, Dakota Layden, geeking out at Stephen King's house before they even headed to the fort.
But the entity they were there to investigate, and the one all the locals know, is Sergeant Leopold Heggie.
Heggie is such a fascinating figure because we have so much historical detail on him. He wasn't just some random soldier who died there. He was the official caretaker of the fort from 1887 to 1900.
And he lived there all by himself.
Essentially. By the late 1800s, the fort was already largely obsolete. It was just him. He lived in a small cottage right on the parade grounds.
Wow.
And the way he was found is just so tragic. He had a duty to raise the American flag every single morning. On July 17, 1900, a local fisherman on the river noticed the flag wasn't up.
That is such a small-town detail. The fisherman noticed the rhythm of the day was broken. It shows how integrated the fort was into the daily life of the river.
Exactly. So they went to investigate and found him extremely ill in his cottage. He died before a doctor could get to him.
But the source suggests he never really left the grounds.
Not at all. And the manifestations are so specific to him. It's not just generic ghost noises or cold spots. People report smelling cherry pipe tobacco.
Which was his preferred blend. They know that from historical records.
And they report hearing the distinct sound of black cavalry boots walking down Two-Step Alley.
Two-Step Alley. Can you explain what that is?
It's a specific, very long, very dark corridor inside the fort. It's made entirely of granite and brick.
So the acoustics would be incredible.
The acoustics would amplify those footsteps perfectly. And that's where the Destination Fear source claims they got one of their most bizarre thermal camera captures to date, right there in that alley.
So that's the ghost story, but let's step back from that for a second. Because the fort itself, the physical structure, is a massive piece of engineering.
It's a monster.
We have this brochure source that really breaks down what this place is. It's not just a haunted house, it's a meticulously designed war machine.
It is a massive granite fortification. In fact, it's the first and the largest granite fort in the entire state of Maine.
And the context of its construction is really important. It was built between 1844 and 1869.
That's a long construction time. That's 25 years.
It was a huge undertaking. And it was driven by border disputes with Great Britain, the so-called Aroostook War.
The Aroostook War. That sounds like something from a fantasy novel. The War of the Aroostook.
It does, but it was a very real, though mostly bloodless, conflict. Sometimes they called it the Pork and Beans War.
Pork and Beans War.
Yeah, it was just a lot of posturing between Canadian and American lumberjacks and militias over where the border between Maine and New Brunswick actually was.
But the fear was real.
The fear was very real. The British had seized control of the Penobscot River during the War of 1812. The U.S. government was determined to make sure that never happened again. They had to protect Bangor.
Why Bangor?
At the time, Bangor was the lumber capital of the world, a massive economic engine. Losing it would have been a catastrophe.
So they built this granite behemoth, basically, to say, stay out of our river.
Exactly. But the great irony, according to the source, is that it never fired a single shot in anger.
Never. After all that.
Never. It was garrisoned during the Civil War with about 50 troops, and again during the Spanish-American War with about 500 troops who had to sleep in tents on the grounds. But no enemy ship ever challenged it.
So it was a deterrent that worked perhaps too well, or was just never actually needed.
One of the two. But the technology they put in there, I mean, they were not messing around. The brochure talks about hotshot furnaces.
Okay, you have to explain what these are because the name alone is terrifying.
They are gruesome when you really think about the mechanics. They're basically small, custom-built brick ovens designed for one purpose, to heat iron cannonballs until they were glowing red hot.
So you're literally baking the ammunition.
You are heating it until it glows cherry red. Then, using these very long specialized tongs and moving very, very carefully so you don't drop it on your foot or the wooden deck of the fort, you load it into the cannon.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It's an extremely high-risk procedure. You had to use wet wadding to separate the hot ball from the gunpowder, otherwise the entire gun explodes in your face.
Wow. And the point of all that risk was what?
The point was specifically to set wooden ships on fire. If you fire a cold cannonball at a wooden hull, it smashes a hole. That's bad, sure, but a good crew can patch a hole with canvas and wood.
Right.
But if you fire a red-hot iron ball into that same hull, it lodges in the wood and it ignites the ship from the inside out. It turns the enemy vessel into a floating furnace. It is a terrifying weapon.
It's a thermal weapon, an incendiary.
Exactly. But here again, the irony, by the time the fort was finally finished in 1869, what had just happened in the world?
The Civil War.
The American Civil War. And the Civil War gave us the Monitor and the Merrimack. It gave us ironclad ships.
So the hot shot became useless overnight.
Completely useless. You can't set an iron ship on fire with a hot cannonball. It just bounces off. The fort is this incredible monument to almost obsolete technology. They spent 25 years building it. And by the time they laid the last stone, the nature of naval warfare had completely changed.
And they also had these massive Rodman cannons. I saw that in the brochure. It says the 15-inch Rodman tube alone weighs 50,000 pounds.
50,000 pounds. Just think about that for a second. That's like stacking 15 mid-sized sedans on top of each other.
Unbelievable.
It required a crew of 12 men just to load and fire it. And it fired shells that weighed up to 450 pounds. It was an absolute monster of a gun designed to crush anything that tried to come up that river.
So you have this massive granite fortress built by human hands, haunted by a lonely caretaker. It's a symbol of the permanence and the past.
It is.
But if you stand on the ramparts of Fort Knox today and you look out over the river, you see something else. You see the Penobscot Narrows Bridge.
And this is where we get to pivot to that trade magazine I mentioned, Pile Driver.
The star of the show.
Because that bridge is a modern marvel of engineering, and it connects directly to the granite legacy of the old fort.
This source was such a genuine surprise. Official publication of the Pile Driving Contractors Association. I have never read a pile driving magazine before in my life.
Most people haven't. It's a very niche world.
But it gives you this amazing behind-the-scenes look at the people who actually build these things. We see the bridge as a finished object, right? A beautiful silhouette against the sky. We drive over it, maybe stop at the observatory at the top and admire the view.
Sure.
But this magazine shows us the sweat and the technology that goes into the foundation, the stuff that's underwater, the stuff we never ever see.
But the Penobscot Narrows Bridge is a cable-stayed bridge. It looks almost futuristic sitting there next to the old 19th century fort.
It replaced the old Waldo Hancock Bridge, which was failing.
Right. But the magazine doesn't focus on the cables or the towers. It focuses on the driven piles, these massive steel or concrete supports that are hammered deep into the earth to hold the whole thing up.
What I loved about this source, though, is how it humanizes the entire industry. You expect it to be just dry technical specs, and we get some of that.
Of course.
But we also get a report on their 11th annual conference, which is held in Nashville.
At the Gaylord Opryland Resort, a very nice venue for a conference.
A very nice venue. And the Education Committee chair, a guy named Mike Elliott, decided that, and this is a direct quote, fun is a good thing.
A bold stance for a pile driving association to take. Usually it's all about, load-bearing capacities and sheer strength.
Not at this conference. They had a golf tournament. Team Skyline Steel won, by the way, so congrats to them.
Congrats, Skyline Steel.
And they had a Western-themed dinner with line dancing. It just reminds you that these massive infrastructure projects are built by regular people who like to have a beer and line dance in Nashville. They're not faceless machines.
It absolutely grounds the engineering in humanity. These aren't robots building our bridges. But the technical details in the ads and the articles are fascinating too. They talk about tools like the e-saxometer.
Which sounds like a terrible 80s synth instrument. And now, on the e-saxometer.
It really does. But it's actually this incredibly sophisticated acoustic device. It counts the blows of the pile-driving hammer and it measures the stroke speed. It's basically listening to the rhythm of the construction.
To make sure the pile is set correctly.
Exactly, to make sure it's stable. If the rhythm is off, the foundation might fail.
Well, so it's almost musical, in a way. The rhythm of the hammer determines the safety of the bridge for the next 100 years.
In a sense, yeah. They also discuss using Greenheart piles.
That sounds like an environmental award. And the Greenheart Award for Excellence goes to.
It sounds very nice and eco-friendly, but it actually refers to a type of tropical hardwood that is incredibly dense.
How dense?
It's so dense it doesn't float. It sinks in water. And it's naturally resistant to marine borers, the little worms and things that eat wood in salt water.
So you have wood from the tropics holding up a bridge in the freezing Penobscot River in Maine. It just shows how global this whole supply chain is.
It really does. But the connection that really just blew my mind, and this is one of those truly hidden layers we promised at the start, was in an advertisement for a company called Nucor Yamato Steel.
Yes, the recycling narrative. This was really poignant.
So the ad shows a picture of New Orleans flooded after Hurricane Katrina. You can see cars submerged in the brown water. It's a tragic, iconic image. We all remember those pictures.
Of course.
But the text of the ad explains that they are a steel recycler. They take those submerged cars, those symbols of loss and destruction, they melt them down, and they turn them into new steel H-piles.
And those piles are then used to build new levees or bridges or buildings.
It implies this fascinating, almost beautiful cycle of destruction and reconstruction. The steel from a family's car lost in a tragedy in New Orleans could theoretically be holding up a bridge in Maine today.
That is poetic. You have the granite from Mount Waldo, which the fort brochure tells us was quarried just 5 miles upriver holding up the fort. And then you have recycled steel from a national tragedy holding up the bridge next to it.
It's layers of history and materials all stacked right on top of each other.
The old fort was built to stop ships from coming up the river. The new bridge is built to let cars pass over it. But both of them require these incredibly deep, strong foundations.
And speaking of traveling upriver, if we follow the Penobscot River north from the fort and the bridge, we eventually arrive in the city of Bangor.
And this is where we move from the engineering layer to the criminal layer.
A very different kind of story.
This is the part of Maine history I had absolutely no idea about. When I think of gangsters, I think of Chicago, I think New York, I think Al Capone. I do not think of Bangor, Maine.
And yet, in 1937, Bangor was the end of the road for the infamous Brady Gang.
Al Brady, public enemy number one.
That is a heavy title. You have to remember that title was held by the likes of John Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd.
It meant you were the most wanted man in America.
It meant the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover himself, was personally invested in catching you, dead or alive.
But Brady wasn't some romanticized figure, was he? The source we have from the Bangor Daily News makes that very clear. He wasn't a folk hero.
Not at all. He was born in Indiana. He was orphaned at age 6.
A rough start to life.
A terrible start. And he turned to a life of violent crime by the time he was 18. He and his gang, they robbed stores and banks all across Indiana.
And they were killers.
They murdered 2 police officers. This wasn't a Robin Hood stealing from the rich situation. These were desperate, violent men who would kill anyone who got in their way.
So how on earth do they end up in Maine? Why Bangor?
They were on the run. They had just escaped from a jail in Indiana, a pretty daring escape, and were fleeing east. They ended up in Bangor, probably thinking it would be a quiet place to lay low and resupply.
They thought it was a backwater.
They probably thought, it's the woods. It's the end of the line. Nobody will ever find us here. It's sleepy.
And this is where the story gets so cinematic. They needed guns.
Right.
So where do they go? Dakin's Sporting Goods in downtown Bangor.
I just imagine that for a second. Walking into a sporting goods store on Main Street, today you'd go in there for some fishing lures or maybe a new kayak.
And they walked in and asked for .45 caliber ammunition. But then they asked for something else.
They wanted Thompson submachine guns.
Tommy guns.
The Chicago typewriter.
At a sporting goods store in Bangor, Maine.
I mean, it was 1937. The regulations were different. You could buy a lot of things through a catalog back then. But even so, you couldn't just pick one up off the shelf.
But they made a fatal mistake.
A huge one. They paid for everything in large wads of cash, and they were acting strangely. They just didn't look like your average deer hunters.
And this is where the hero of this story enters. Everett Shep. Hurd, the store owner.
Hurd was sharp. He didn't panic. He took their order. He told them, sure, I don't have them in stock, but I have to order them for you.
Okay.
But as soon as they walked out the door, he took his suspicions straight to the police and the FBI. He just knew something was very wrong.
So the FBI sets a trap. Hurd tells the gang, come back in a few weeks, I'll have your guns ready for you.
And on October 12, 1937, the gang returns. Al Brady, Clarence Lee Sheffer Jr., and James Dalhover, they walk right into the ambush.
Now, this wasn't a quiet arrest. This wasn't a hands up, you're surrounded situation.
Dalhover was arrested inside the store. He went in first to check it out. But Brady and Sheffer were waiting outside in a car on Central Street. When the FBI agents revealed themselves, and this included an agent named Walter Walsh, who famously posed as a clerk inside the store, a massive firefight broke out right there in the middle of downtown Bangor.
The source calls it a spectacular firefight.
Brady and Sheffer got out of their car and just started shooting. The FBI returned fire. It was over very quickly, but it was incredibly intense. Brady and Sheffer were both killed right there in the street.
It must have been a massive event for the town.
The source says people swarmed the street afterwards, hundreds and hundreds of people. It was a spectacle. It was probably the biggest thing to happen in Bangor, maybe ever, at that point.
And the bodies were actually put on display?
They were. They were displayed at a local funeral home, and people lined up around the block to see them.
That is so macabre by today's standards.
Very. But it was the 1930s. The whole concept of the public enemy was a huge media sensation. For the public, seeing the body was proof that the monster was really dead.
It's just wild to imagine. You're walking down Central Street in Bangor today, maybe grabbing a coffee, and right there on that spot, 80-some years ago, public enemy number one was gunned down by G-Men.
And the city absolutely remembers it. There's a plaque on the sidewalk marking the spot. For years, there was a mural in a coffee shop called Giacomo's. They even do reenactments.
Reenactments?
Oh, yeah. The source mentions a local historian, Dick Shaw, who played Al Brady in a 70th anniversary reenactment.
That is a very specific type of local pride, isn't it? This is where we shot the bad guys.
It's part of the local lore now. It puts Bangor on the map of American crime history. But here is the final crucial connection: the bodies. What do you do with the body of a notorious gangster that nobody comes to claim?
Right? He's an orphan. His whole gang is either dead or arrested. There's no family.
So you have to bury them. And this brings us to our final location, Mount Hope Cemetery.
Now, Mount Hope isn't just any old graveyard. The source we have for it, from Wikipedia, describes it as the second oldest garden cemetery in the entire United States.
And this is a really crucial distinction. It was modeled after Mount Auburn Cemetery in Boston. The garden cemetery movement started in the 1830s.
What was the idea behind it?
It was about making these places into public parks. They added walking paths, ponds, beautiful landscaping, and trees.
So it wasn't supposed to be just a spooky boneyard behind a church.
Not at all. It was designed to be a place for the living to come and contemplate nature and beauty. People would go there for picnics. It was designed to be beautiful, not scary.
But it's also the final resting place of Al Brady.
For many, many years, he was in completely unmarked graves. No family ever came for him. He was just put in the ground and forgotten.
But he has a headstone now.
It took nearly 70 years until 2007 for a headstone to finally be placed there. A local historical group added a simple, small stone.
But the irony is who he's buried with. Mount Hope is not a potter's field. It is the resting place of Maine's absolute elite.
Correct. You have Hannibal Hamlin buried there.
Abraham Lincoln's first vice president.
The men who stood right next to Lincoln during the Civil War. A governor of Maine, a senator. You also have lumber barons, Civil War generals, foreign ambassadors. The very pillars of the society he sought to tear down.
The men who built the state of Maine.
And right there in the same earth is Al Brady, the man who represented the complete breakdown of law and order.
High society and the criminal underworld sharing the same ground. It's the ultimate equalizer, isn't it?
The soil doesn't care if you were a vice president or a bank robber.
It creates this incredible jarring contrast. You can walk past a giant, ornate monument to a general, and then a few feet away, you stumble upon the tiny, simple grave of a gangster.
It captures the full spectrum of humanity, doesn't it? The builders and the destroyers, all in one place.
And just to bring this whole thing full circle, back to the spooky layer and the pop culture perception of Maine, Mount Hope has a very direct connection to the master of horror himself.
It has to be Stephen King.
Stephen King. He lives nearby in Bangor. That's his home base.
And he used Mount Hope Cemetery as a filming location for the movie adaptation of Pet Sematary.
It wasn't the inspiration for the book. That was a different, real Pet Cemetery. But it was a key movie location.
Right. The scene where the little boy, Gage, is buried, that was filmed at Mount Hope. So you have this fictional horror overlaid directly on top of the real history.
And the source also mentions that Stephen King was actually hanging out with the Destination Fear crew, the ghost hunters we talked about at the very beginning, when they were in town to investigate Fort Knox.
So the loop is officially closed. You have the horror writer, the gangster, the politicians, and the ghosts all intersecting in this one small part of Maine.
It's just amazing when you lay it all out like that. We started this deep dive with a Travel Channel snub.
Which I think we have thoroughly debunked, I hope. Maine is scary.
Oh, definitely. Then we found the ghost of a lonely caretaker at a massive granite fort that never even fought a war. We learned about hotshot furnaces and 50,000-pound cannons.
We looked at the driven piles holding up the modern bridge right next door, and we learned about the culture of the people who build them, the line dancers and the Esaximeters.
We traveled upriver to a Tommy gun shootout in front of a sporting goods store in Bangor.
And we ended up in a beautiful garden cemetery that houses both vice presidents and bank robbers.
So what does it all mean when we look at these different layers, the granite, the gangsters, the ghosts? What's the real takeaway here?
I think it just challenges the simplicity of our perceptions. Maine isn't just vacation land. It's a place of deep, hard foundations, like the granite of the fort and the steel piles of the bridge. It's a harsh environment that demands resilience.
Right.
But on top of that foundation, you have these violent, chaotic bursts of history, like the Brady shootout. And then sort of lingering over all of it, you have the stories we tell ourselves, you have the ghosts.
The ghosts are the memory of the place.
Exactly. It's like the ghosts are the way the state processes its own history. The stain on Colonel Buck's tomb is a way of remembering a potential miscarriage of justice. The roadside specters are memories of the harsh winters and the dangerous roads.
So the supernatural isn't separate from the history.
It is the history. It's just the history refusing to fade away quietly.
It makes me wonder, though, if these places like Fort Knox and Mount Hope preserve the physical history so well, the stones and the bones, why are we so obsessed with the ghosts?
That really is the provocative question, isn't it? And, well, perhaps the ghosts are just our way of forcing ourselves to pay attention to the history.
What do you mean?
I mean, we might walk right past a historical plaque about a caretaker and not even bother to read it. It's just dry text. But you tell us his ghost still smokes cherry tobacco and walks the halls at night.
Suddenly you want to know his name.
Suddenly you want to know his name, you want to know his story. The ghosts are the hook.
The ghosts are the hook that pulls us into the deep dive.
Precisely. They're the entry point to the real, complicated, and fascinating history.
Well, I, for one, will never look at a lobster roll, or, for that matter, a pile driver, the same way again.
Good.
Next time you find yourself in Maine, look past the lighthouse. There's a lot more going on right beneath the surface. Thanks for listening.
Keep looking beneath the surface.
We'll see you next time.